Volk Han had a great year in 1993, his second year in pro wrestling, rocketing past the poorly booked Kiyoshi Tamura to claim the mantle as the top worked shoot fighter. One of the reasons Han surpassed Tamura for Shoot Wrestler of the Year was that he was consistently featured in rings. UWFI seemed to flirt with actually doing something with Tamura when they sent him to America to train with Luthez, then brought him back to challenge Nobuhiko Takada for the first time in the promotion's biggest native versus native match of the year on February 14th, 1993. Tamura managed to pull by far the best match we'd seen from uninspired Takada since UWFI began, but predictably lost, which was fine, except that they didn't square off again for another decade, and that was in Takada's retirement match at Pride 23 on November 24th, 2002. UWFI went right back to being a Takada versus Foreigner promotion, with all the other natives just toiling in the undercard, to the point that they then made the crucial mistake of immediately jobbing Tamura to Dan the Beast Severn on April 10th to set up Severn putting Takada over on May 6th. Han being the top foreign attraction in rings, and thus being featured on almost every show, certainly helped provide opportunity for him to showcase his amazing creativity. However, Han's best match of 1993 was actually an 8-minute mid-card bout against Masayuki Naruse on October 23rd at Fukuoka International Center. It was an opening round match in Ring's annual year-end tournament, this year billed as Battle Dimension, but it wasn't a particularly important or even competitive match. Still, it might be the best under 10-minute wrestling match ever, which shows the length Han went to in order to make all his matches unique and memorable. Han's very good January 23, 1993 match with Andre Tornamidze was just his 10th match as a professional, with rings generally running one show a month, with a portion of their entire roster. All of Han's 1993 matches except his May 29th match against a washed-up Willie Williams are recommended. After carrying the limited Cyborg Dick Vrij to what was previously the shoot fighting match of the year on July 13th, Han finally put it all together in this bout against Naruse, elevating his match to the level of greatness that he was previously only able to show as an individual. This was genius level maestro stuff from start to finish. The moment he had Naruse in his clutches was the moment Naruse found himself propelled to his back with shocking explosion and speed, left to fend off an amazing chain of threats before he even knew what hit him. The match was basically an extended scramble, interrupted by Naruse's rope escapes. That's a slight exaggeration, but the whole thing was super urgent and never felt cooperative despite a ridiculous amount of flash for the genre. Han doesn't do MMA as chess, but that doesn't mean he isn't concerned with realistically portraying combat. He has a different focus to his realism though, relying on pedal-to-the-metal speed to overwhelm his opponent with a barrage of attacks they have to answer. Technically, the opponent goes along with what Han is doing, but there's a great deal of brute force violence and explosion to Han's technique, so it's not unreasonable for the opponent to roll with the pressure. Because Han jerks Naruse's arm with so much conviction, it feels totally believable that Naruse would use a form of gymnastics to alleviate the pressure on his shoulder, rather than like loose cooperative lucha libre, even though movement-wise it's ultimately not so different. Han's techniques are very complex, and he doesn't sacrifice being meticulous and detail-oriented with the setup and execution of his joint manipulations just to be fast and aggressive. This feels like the sort of match where the cocky student gets put in place by the wily master. Naruse is actually one of Maeda's students, but he was just 20 years old and had been wrestling a little more than a year. You could say this match was a short squash, and to an extent you wouldn't be wrong. However, that was logical and not a bad thing, given Han was the top foreigner, and Naruse was badly overmatched in virtually every way. If we can free ourselves from the modern mindset where every TV jobber has to play even with the world champion for at least 10 minutes, we'll realize Han's offense was worlds better than anything Naruse could have done in its place, if there were more back and forth. Naruse isn't a spot merchant who needs to get his flips in to make his mark. He's just a scrappy kid who was taking an extra beating, gutting it out for as long as he could against an opponent who was very believably superior. Everything Han did was awesome, delivering a match so enthralling that he managed to believably increase interest in Naruse, despite it being one-sided. They packed a ton of technical action into the 8 minutes they had, 25 times the substance you'd see in virtually any modern 35-minute exhibit of New Japan bloatware. As usual, Han was doing things you don't see from anyone else, including some you've never seen even from him before. This isn't the format Han would be able to use against Maeda. Every match can't be the big blowout of the biggest stars, though. But this match was much better for not involving Maeda, even though Naruse wasn't able to put up as much of a fight. Han would have had to slow things down and stretch things out to cater to Maeda's plodding mobility. Slower pace, lower work rate, conventional offense, and general durdling. There would probably have been more bombs, and certainly the outcome would have been in doubt, but Maeda's mediocrity would also be siphoning a lot of Han's awesomeness in order for their more even mix to come together. Han has the moves, but he also needs someone to move with him to maximize their impressiveness. Naruse did so many things well here to make the much more interesting and exciting wrestler, Han, look that much better. Naruse is an excellent athlete and a good worker who knows how to play the underdog. He has the speed and explosion, the flexibility and the bump-taking ability to make everything Han does to him seem that much more impressive. Naruse gave up a lot of size, which made it easier for Han to toss him around, but he showed a lot of fire, heart, and determination. Naruse had the crowd, and knew when a little acting would go a long way. This match was super dramatic, even though Han was basically schooling Naruse, and there was no chance in hell that Naruse would win. It's difficult to pinpoint all the little things Naruse did to improve the match, or how important it was for Han to be working with the caliber of athlete who could not only keep up with him, but actually enhance what he was trying to do. It's easier to just look at Han's December 8th, 1993 match against Pavel Orlov, where Han tries to do a similar awe-inspiring match against a debuting Russian heavyweight I assume he trained, and see that it just doesn't have the same oomph. The Orlov match is very good, but he can't move with Han, or react well enough to him to make similar spots reach the same awe-inspiring level they do against Naruse. Naruse didn't get a ton of licks in, but proved to be the best opponent Han has faced so far, able to match Han's speed and energy. He didn't let being outgunned get in the way of his determination. He's also a lot of fun here, spunkily refusing to back down. Han is so skilled that you just accept him both dominating and winning. The thing is, his drama is based on the holds and the escapes rather than the outcome, so he can move an audience almost equally well, whether he's obviously winning or he's in a match that could go either way. His matches are exciting and dramatic in the more important and difficult to achieve hold-for-hold sense that carries you along for the ride, rather than an overarching outcome-oriented sense where you kind of sleep on them, then wake up for the finishing sequence. He does so many things you don't see elsewhere, keeps evolving, innovating, and inventing, that he holds the audience captive in anticipation. Victory may sometimes be a foregone conclusion, but you're never hoping his enthralling contest comes to an end. This whole match was a highlight, and so much more explosive and impressive than a retelling could possibly be. They delivered really dynamic and energetic action from start to finish. Han had big throws and slams into submission attempts, and Naruse was taking chances in stand-up because the ground was going to be hopeless. Naruse had a rear naked choke attempt, but Han stood and jumped backwards for the Michael Chandler slam, then worked the leg until he had Naruse's legs split, one held against his shoulder and the other scissored with his legs. Han had Naruse dead to rights on a number of occasions, but Naruse was usually close enough to the ropes. Naruse may not have had a lot of moments, but he was able to establish a path to victory with an early body hook knockdown. He had answers on the ground, even though Han had 10 answers back. Han did a great job of neutralizing and or isolating one body part so Naruse couldn't defend the other, avoiding the typical silly pro wrestling situations where the opponent's only course of action is to refuse to defend themselves so they can be posed in an outrageous manner. Unlike this usual pro wrestling nonsense where the opponent magically can't go anywhere despite only one point of control, best exemplified by the ridiculous Kurt Angle ankle lock, Han couldn't take Naruse down with a Kimura, so he dropped down and scissored his right leg to hold Naruse in place while he worked for the Kimura on the ground. The camera angle wasn't great, their bodies blocking us from how Han's knee bar was locked. At first glance, the end felt phony because Naruse was trapped for way too long, but actually Han was too low on the knee to warrant the submission, just scissoring it to help keep Naruse from getting his leg free while he instead worked for the heel hook. This was a case where selling in pro wrestling actually worked because Naruse reserved it for the most crucial points. His selling here even addressed our disbelief, rather than created more of it by making us wonder why he wasn't defending himself. He survived the knee bar, but also paid the price of being in it too long, and was now hobbled. One reason pro wrestling psychology fails is the matches are structured so the mat and limb work take a back seat to the high spots, and thus come very early on in most cases. Assuming any lingering effects is the grand fallacy of 21st century reviewing, going against 99% of what actually takes place in a real fight, as proved every week by every MMA show. If wrestlers did sell limb work as a serious injury, rather than simply registering the opponent's offense when it happened, that would make all the showy stuff that takes place for the bulk of the match 100 times more unbelievable, because it would have to take that much longer to set up the spots they couldn't even reasonably do at full speed without the opponent allowing them to. In other words, Just about the entirety of everyone's moveset would require the opponent to find even more ways to stand or lay around doing nothing for another minute at a time. Han and Naruse were smart enough not to extend their match after Naruse's never surrender rope escape. An injured Naruse was a sitting duck, no need to waste 5 minutes trying to convince us otherwise. Naruse had a final hope spot getting one last body hook in, but Han avoided his follow-up attempt, buckled Naruse with a knee to the midsection, then rolled him into an armbar for the win. Just an awesome Han clinic, the best shoot-style match of 1993, and at 8 minutes 8 seconds, probably the best under 10-minute match ever. I give this match 4.5 out of 5 stars.